National 5 Biology Life on Earth video number 4 Food Production and Evolution of Species. The increasing human population requires an increased food yield. Fertilizers can provide chemicals such as nitrates, which improve crop yield, and pesticides can kill plants and animals, which reduce crop yield. Nitrates dissolved in soil water are absorbed into plants. Nitrates are used to produce amino acids, which are synthesized into plant proteins. Animals consume plants or other animals to obtain amino acids for protein synthesis. Fertilizers can be added to the soil to increase the nitrate content of the soil. Fertilizers can leach into fresh water, adding extra unwanted nitrates. This will increase algal populations, which can cause algal blooms. Algal blooms reduce light levels, killing aquatic plants. These dead plants, as well as dead algae, become food for bacteria, which increase greatly in number. The bacteria use up large quantities of oxygen, reducing the oxygen availability for other organisms. Genetically modified crops can be used to reduce the use of fertilizers. Pesticides sprayed onto crops can accumulate in the bodies of organisms over time. This is called bioaccumulation. As they are passed along food chains, toxicity increases and can reach lethal levels. This is called biomagnification. In this diagram, a certain level of pesticide is indicated by a small red dot. The pesticide is applied and taken on board by producers. These producers are eaten by primary consumers, and as you can see, the level of pesticide builds up in the bodies of the primary consumers. This process continues up until the tertiary consumers have consumed so much pesticide it can reach toxic or even lethal levels. Alternatives to the use of pesticides include the use of genetically modified crops and biological control. GM crops or genetically modified crops. Some crop plants can be genetically modified to produce their own built-in toxin or poison, such as botulinum toxin in genetically modified tomatoes. These crops can resist pests and do not need to be sprayed with pesticides. Other GM crops, such as varieties of rice, can take up nitrates more efficiently and can reduce the need for chemical fertilizers. Biological control involves introducing a natural enemy, which may be a predator, a parasite, or a disease, of the pest species to reduce its numbers. The biological control organism targets the pest only, and it does not involve the use of pesticides. Examples of biological control: the introduction of ladybirds to control aphids, or such as greenfly. Ladybirds are natural predators of aphids. The introduction of calicivirus into Australia to control the local rabbit populations. And the introduction of the cactus moth in Australia to control the spread of the prickly pear cactus. Now we come to evolution of species. Mutations are random changes to genetic material. Mutations may be neutral, confer an advantage or a disadvantage to survival. Mutations are spontaneous and are the only source of new alleles of genes. The causes of mutations: environmental factors such as radiation and some chemicals can increase the rate of mutation, and these are called mutagenic agents. New alleles produced by mutations can result in plants and animals becoming better adapted to their environment. An adaptation is an inherited characteristic that makes an organism well suited to survival in its environment or its niche. Variation relates to the differences within or between species. Variation within a population makes it possible for a population to evolve over time in response to changing environmental conditions. Natural selection. Species usually produce more offspring than the environment can sustain. Natural selection or survival of the fittest occurs when there are selection pressures, for example, predation, competition, or disease. The best adapted individuals in a population survive to reproduce, passing on the favorable alleles that confer the selective advantage. These alleles increase in frequency within the population. Members of the same biological species are able to interbreed and produce fertile offspring. Now we look at speciation. This is the formation of new species and occurs after part of a population becomes isolated by an isolation barrier, which can be either geographical, such as mountains, seas, or deserts, ecological, for example, changes in pH, salinity, or changes in different habitats, or behavioral, for example, courtship behaviors or pollination mechanisms fail. Continuing with speciation and how it actually occurs, subpopulations of a species are separated by an isolation barrier. Different mutations occur in each subpopulation. Natural selection selects for different mutations in each group due to different selection pressures. And each subpopulation evolves until they become so genetically distinct that they are now two different species.